This podcast is brought to you by Spotify for podcasters. Have you yourself ever wanted to become a podcaster? Well, Spotify makes it simple and easy to do so. You can record, edit, and even distribute your podcast straight from their app. The best part? It is absolutely 100% free. Visit their website, podcasters.spotify.com, for more details, and download the app on your Apple or Android devices today to get started on your podcasting adventure. That's Spotify for podcasters. What's up, everybody? Travis Fowler, Harkrider, back again with the Four Corner Podcast. And you know what that means. It's time. Let's talk wrestling. This week, I have to say, it was pretty lackluster. There wasn't like anything that important, I want to say, happened. I don't even want to say questionable things happened, but it just had a lot of more concerns, I guess, more than anything. Raw and SmackDown both have been peddling the bloodline angle, which honestly, overall, the situation right now with the Solo Usos rivalry against Zayn, Owens, and Riddle, I don't want to say it's being played out, but it's definitely being used to, I guess, its fullest extent, which, depending on who you are, is a good thing or a bad thing. I personally am kind of growing tired, but honestly, the entire backlash situation right now isn't exactly promising. Of course, like I said on Raw, we dealt with the Usos and Solo, Riddle, Zayn, and Owens. But on that same show, we got the confirmation that it is indeed going to be Brock Lesnar versus Cody Rhodes, first time ever. And maybe it's too soon to say this, but I feel like Backlash is basically a one-match show at the moment. There's only one match that's intriguing me, and it's Rhodes and Lesnar. But that's also for personal reasons, because I personally believe Rhodes should have won at Mania. I know that's kind of been a sentiment for fans. There's others that feel everything went the way it was supposed to with Reigns winning. And again, I've said I'm going to let everything play out, so I'm going to reserve my judgment for whether it was the right call or not until we see how this unfolds over the next year. I just personally felt a certain way, still feel that way, but I'm also one to say, let's just see how things progress. Like I said, SmackDown wasn't much different from Raw in regards to the bloodline scenarios. And they really were just mainly hyping the draft. They did have a great Intercontinental title match with Xavier Woods and Gunter. That was an amazing matchup that Xavier Woods was just showing off that he is much more than just the third member of the New Day. So it's very great to see him getting his just rewards. Um, I haven't watched Impact yet, so I'm going to say that this is pending whether or not they had a good show. And I'm guessing, coming off of their most recent pay-per-view Rebellion, that it was a pretty good Fallout show. Now that Steve Maclin is the Impact World Champion, I'll probably get a chance to watch that later this upcoming week before the new episode drops on Thursday. But honestly, I think AEW probably had the best show this week, even though there's something I will discuss here in just a moment. But they had the TNT title match where Wardlow and Powerhouse Hobbs went head to head in a good matchup where Wardlow picked up the title win and then promptly went right into I guess, a feud they're going to build with Luchasaurus. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We saw as well the angle with Jericho and Adam Cole play out in what was a very good, emotionally charged angle that is going to help build that feud more heading into Double or Nothing, because I feel like that's how it's going to go. The four pillars are still a big focus on AEW right now, which is great. You know, it's homegrown talent. And it was announced there would be a mini tournament with a bye, and Darby Allin got the bye. So we saw the final four-pillar match that was just right there, and they went ahead and pulled the trigger for it. Jungle Boy and Sammy Guevara, where with the assistance of MJF, Sammy picked up the win. So that has now put Sammy versus Darby for, I believe, next week to determine who's going to face MJF or Double or Nothing. I still feel like, though, that somehow this is going to get schmozzed into a fatal four-way, because I think that's kind of the route they've been planning on. So I'm still going to think that's how it's going to end up for Double or Nothing, but time will tell. We'll see how things go. But keeping on to AEW, I know a lot of people have questioned certain antics of AEW. I myself have been as well. But as I've also stated, AEW has its place in professional wrestling, especially when they're the alternative product. Which, by the way, we got news that there's another big announcement that Tony Khan is going to be making this upcoming week. Most people speculate it's about the rumored Saturday show that supposedly also is going to split the rosters, which will see the comeback of CM Punk. And basically, the roster split is rumored to be people who want Punk and people who don't want Punk. Either way, there's an inflated roster with AEW, so it's better if you kind of go, I guess, the Raw SmackDown brand split route and have two separate shows for two separate rosters. Or you could just do the Ring of Honor thing since you've got that brand, AEW and ROH, which they still haven't really differentiated between those two either, and I really wish they would, but that's just, again, a personal opinion. But what I want to talk about is a photo that was posted this past week, as you're going to see right now, where it showed the international title is greater than the TNT title. And it's hard to argue that because literally, as I stated before, it's almost like the TNT title is the hot potato championship. Nobody has really held that title for any significant amount of time over, I think, the last year. And it's gone to at least 3 or 4 different people. But the international title, on the other hand, has actually had more prestige, I think, added to it, especially with Orange Cassidy being a very defending champion, even back when it was still the All Atlantic title and then renamed to the international title. Orange Cassidy has consistently been on TV. He's been consistently defending the title. And it's almost like they're positioning the international title as the new top second tier title, which is kind of sad on the TNT titles we have since it was the first alternate title that was presented in AEW. But I've even said I always had a little bit of a little angst towards the TNT name because obviously you named it after the network that spawned your original show Dynamite to begin with, and I understand where that was coming from. But on the other side of it, it really pigeonholes that title, and especially when, as I've stated before, you don't defend the title on the network that it's named after, and that goes for the TBS title. It's very rare you see that defended, at least on Dynamite regularly. So I've always had my issues with the TNT TBS titles, but the international title does look like it is being positioned as the second top tier title. And I don't have a problem with that, especially, like I said, the work that Orange Cassidy has been doing. He's made that title worth having. He's had great matches, he's had great opponents. So overall, this might be a great direction, even though it also feels like the international is kind of going right off of intercontinental. But it's to each his own and it's a name thing. So it's not that big of a deal. But I actually do like what they've done with the international title thus far. And hopefully they continue this trend. And if that does indeed become the new secondary title for the AEW roster, I am more than okay with that. Now, moving into WWE stuff, we got the draft that's coming up this upcoming Friday to start, and it'll conclude on Monday. My thought is that Backlash will be following that Monday draft edition of Raw, so they'll probably initiate the full roster changes on that following Monday. So a week from that Monday that they conclude the draft will probably be when they enact the roster changes for Raw and SmackDown. There's been a lot of rumors of secondary titles switching brands. There's been rumors of different factions going from one brand to the other. But one thing that was actually surprising is on the graphic itself for the draft, as well as the announced names that WWE has just released within the last day or so, Bray Wyatt is absent from that roster list. Now, we haven't seen Wyatt since the last time he went and did his stuff on TV where it was supposed to build with Bobby Lashley and Wyatt for Mania. after we saw the last Firefly Funhouse segment, we didn't see Bray Wyatt anymore. And a lot of people were wondering if this was the end for Wyatt's second run in WWE. Since then, it's been dispelled as a medical issue, not a creative thing. So hopefully, also with the release of Uncle Howdy's theme this past Friday for WWE Music Group, even though it's a very small thing, maybe we're getting closer to the return of Bray Wyatt. And hopefully, we do see him again soon. I would like to see him back on TV. I know this story that we've seen recently hasn't really spelled out a whole lot of excitement for some people, but I do believe that Bray Wyatt is a very creative human being, which is apparent to, I think, everybody at this point. And hopefully we'll see him back and in good health when he arrives back to WWE TV sooner rather than later. But as I was saying earlier about the Backlash card, it's pretty much lackluster. I called it a one match show because to me, that's how it feels. Now, you have a few other matches, obviously, that have been announced. We talked about the 6-man tag earlier. The SmackDown Women's title was Zelina Vega and Rhea Ripley. The U.S. title, triple threat now with Austin Theory defending against Bobby Lashley and Bronson Reed, continuing the Lashley-Reed feud, which I think is going to be pretty fun in the overall if they continue it past what we're doing right now. But on Friday night, the most wow situation for Backlash, the most random match you could throw, is none other than Seth freaking Rollins versus Omos. Like, where did this even come from and why? I've been a big proponent of stories over one-off matches, and this is kind of one of those situations only on the WWE front where it's like, why would you book Rollins and Omos together when there's been no interaction between the two? Rollins, I don't even think was on this past edition of Raw. There was those rumors going around that he has heat with WWE because of a segment being cut after WrestleMania on the Raw After Mania. But I don't know. This just is, I don't like it. I think a lot of people are also scratching their heads like, where did this even come from? But, maybe we'll be surprised. Omos has actually showed that he's not too terrible for what he is because he is a giant and he is a attraction for a match. His match with Braun Strowman in Saudi Arabia, I actually enjoyed. His match with Lesnar at Mania ended up being a little bit of a fun match at the beginning of night 2. So, I mean, there's hope for him, but again, he's an attraction. He's not super athletic. And that's not to say that he isn't athletic as a whole, but right now he's very much the giant in this situation. So it'll be interesting to see with only 2 weeks to build. We already know how I feel about stories and matches and everything of that sort. So hopefully this will be somewhat decent of a match, but I don't have a whole lot of faith or hope for it. So, but we'll see. We'll see how they end up going with the next 2 weeks until Backlash. Also, speaking of draft and WWE, we have heard, at least through the online rumor mill, which of course in the IWC, there's some things you can take with a grain of salt. With this recent announcement of Rollins versus Omos, there's been a lot of people who have speculated that Vince McMahon is indeed back in control. It's hard to argue with some of the circumstances we've seen, from the Lesnar-Omos match to now Omos versus Rollins. And it very well could be true. And I know a lot of us have enjoyed the months that led up to Mania, where it was the Triple H creative running Raw. A lot of logic, a lot of good stories, a lot of good pops from what Triple H built going into Mania. The Triple H booking, while not perfect, was better than what we were dealing with. And a lot of people, including myself, were disappointed when we heard that Vince may be running creative again, especially after that atrocious Raw after Mania. But from what reports have been saying, the draft is going to be the actual start of the Triple H creative reign in WWE. I am perfectly okay with that being the case. There are some feuds already taking place that I hope either continue or hopefully they get settled before they go too far, like Cross and Nakamura, for instance, actually could be a good match. So hopefully that program will stay, because I doubt it goes away after these next 2 weeks. So whatever brand they end up on, I hope they both go to that same brand, because Cross versus Nakamura could be very intriguing, especially with this new resurgence of Nakamura build that Triple H is going to start pushing. We know he's one of his NXT guys, as was Karrion Kross. So good things look to be on the horizon for both those guys. Anyway, I digress. The draft is supposedly where Triple H is now going to have full creative reign, and we're going to fully see the Triple H era of creative going into full effect after the draft. So people will end up on shows that he wants. We'll kind of see where the creative direction goes for Raw and SmackDown and the people that are on each show. And I'm hyped for it. I actually think the draft can be really good this year. It's right in the midst of happening, obviously, this upcoming Friday, and then concluding on the following Monday. This is going to be a fun time, and it'll be interesting to see who goes where and how the draft shapes the next year for WWE. One guy's future who we are interested in seeing how it shapes out is Bill Goldberg, who has come out and said that WWE didn't really stick to their side of an agreement where he expressed he wanted to do somewhat of a legit retirement angle or retirement tour or whatever you want to call it to cap off his career, because he believes the fans deserve to see a true retirement for that character. And I actually don't disagree with that at all. But because of his WWE contract expiring, there has been rumors that he is looking at doing this on his own and going the independent route for a what is rumored to be a 4-city retirement tour. It'll be interesting to see if this ends up going in the route of Goldberg financing it himself, which he said he is capable of doing, which 4 cities he's going to pick to have his final 4 matches in, and more importantly, who they're going to face. So I am interested to see where Goldberg goes. Does he go to AEW? Does he re-sign with WWE? Does he end up doing it all on his own? Only time will tell, but I'm very interested to see how Goldberg takes on this supposed retirement tour that he has alluded to having. Now, it's a very minor thing, but we've got the next Saudi Arabia show coming up, and it was originally slated to be King and Queen of the Ring, which it was a disappointing situation when it was announced, I believe 2 or 3 weeks ago, that they were effectively changing that to now just Night of Champions and resurrecting that brand. A lot of people, including myself, were a little disappointed to see that, because I've always enjoyed tournaments, especially the King of the Ring, and actually using Queen of the Ring as well. Hopefully, we'll see that either going into Night of Champions as like the finals for both tournaments, because it would kind of run with that theme. And if not, hopefully we see it later on this year, because I really did like the idea of them bringing that back. Um, it'll be very interesting to see how Night of Champions is handled, because there's been some rumors as to whether or not, again, the King and Queen of the Ring finals, will they take place there? Will Roman Reigns be on the show? I don't see how he isn't, considering it's called Night of Champions, and I believe he's competed on just about every Saudi Arabia card if he's been available. But I do think with Night of Champions, it does kind of pigeonhole the situation, but at the same breath, I don't think there's too much of an issue of it. And according to what some news outlets have said, it'll be very apparent, especially after Backlash, why the name was changed. But again, I'm just hoping we get King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring at some point this year. If not now, later in the year would be fantastic. And in other big news, WWE and Twitch have finally reached an agreement that will see the WWE stars coming back to the Twitch network, where the stars of WWE are going to get the majority of the profits, and Twitch and WWE will get the remaining share of those profits. And apparently, it'll see WWE getting just a little bit from the Twitch profits. So all this is supposed to be very talent friendly, and I couldn't be happier for those that actually made a good side hustle on Twitch, especially during the pandemic days. they were making money like nobody's business, and it was very disappointing when WWE wanted to try to lay down the hammer and take that source of revenue away from them and even take it out of their downside guaranteed contracts. So this looks like it has shaped up for the better on the talent end. And congratulations to everybody who's going to end up prospering with this new arrangement that's been made. The final thing I want to talk about, though, kind of plays into what we were talking about with Omos and Seth Rollins, as well as the match we saw a few weeks ago with Vikingo and Kenny Omega. And that was, what really is more important for a match? Is it the participants / star power, or is it the story going into it? That also plays into the complaint Ric Flair had with Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley not main eventing night one. His argument being that tradition showed that the winner of the Royal Rumble would main event WrestleMania. Well, for one, there's been several instances where that has not been the case at all. So that's one argument you can add to go against that logic of thinking. But in the other sense as well, I've stated it, many veterans have stated it, and even people I know on the indie scene that feel this exact same way. Yeah, star power is important, and the participants can make a match or even sell a match. But the importance of a match really depends on what the story is that's going into it. Because I know for me personally, and a few others that I know, story is what sells matches. Stories can make a match feel like a big time deal when it's done correctly. Whether you're adding drama into it, whether it's like a big fight feel build, kind of to the degree that Rhodes and Reigns did, because even though they tried to incorporate some personal stuff in there, it really just came down to these two guys who are stalwarts of this generation going at it to see who really is the best for the championship. And that story was so good. It was very well built. And then on the other side, where you could have a personal situation be a big story builder, was the Undisputed Tag Titles that main evented night one, which is why they got the main event of night one. The story of the Bloodline against Zayn and Owens was much more of a main event story than Ripley and Flair was, even though Rhea Ripley won the Royal Rumble and Charlotte Flair was the champion. So again, I'm not going to speak for everybody because it's for everybody's taste. One-off matches are okay, as I stated before, because the star power can sell that match and you don't really need a story for that. But for me personally, that's not what I enjoy most. I can enjoy a one-off, but you're always going to get my fandom more if you have a good story to build to this hopefully great payoff. And even if it's a situation where you have the heel triumph over the face, depending on how it's done, that can still be beneficial for both parties involved as well. So for me personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but story is always going to override star power or participants in a wrestling match to catch my interest. Guys, that's all I got for you this week. Do you feel the same way I do? Let me know what you look for in a match personally. Do you prefer participants over story, or are you story over participants? Let me know in those comment sections down below. Make sure you have subscribed to our YouTube channel, like and share all of our videos, and make sure you hit the bell so that you're notified anytime we upload a new video to the channel. Also, like us over on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hopefully you've checked out the new edition of Call Along that dropped this past weekend, featuring the famous, arguably most famous Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Mankind. Also, if you like the shirt that I was wearing on today's episode, Boyhood Dream, Shawn Michaels, head over to www.shop.com right now or homage.com and pick up your shirt today. And as always, I will be back next week with another edition of the Four Corner Podcast. So for now, you take care, enjoy your week ahead, and continue to love pro wrestling.